Story number 1. The Crying House. Winter in Kentucky brought a stillness that blanketed the small town of Willow Creek in a serene, white hush. The trees stood bare against the gray sky, their skeletal branches stretching out like desperate fingers. As an aspiring writer, I often sought inspiration in the quiet corners of life. But nothing could have prepared me for the night I encountered the legend of the Crying House. Willow Creek was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, where stories were passed down through generations like cherished heirlooms. The Crying House, an abandoned Victorian mansion deep within the surrounding woods, was the centerpiece of many whispered tales. Locals spoke of a woman's sorrowful cries echoing through the night, a haunting lament that sent shivers down their spines. According to the legend, the cries belonged to Eleanor Hart, a mother who had lost her child in the house over 70 years ago. I had always been fascinated by ghost stories, their eerie allure drawing me into realms of mystery and the supernatural. When I heard about the Crying House from an old friend, I couldn't resist the temptation to investigate. Armed with my notebook, a flashlight, and a healthy dose of skepticism, I decided to spend a night in the mansion, determined to uncover the truth behind the haunting. The drive to the house was uneventful, the snow-covered roads glistening under the pale winter moonlight. As I approached the mansion, a sense of foreboding settled over me. The house loomed large and menacing, its once grand facade now marred by years of neglect. Windows were shattered, doors hung ajar, and the overgrown garden seemed to reclaim the property with wild abandon. Yet, amidst the decay, a faint, ethereal light emanated from the upper windows, casting ghostly shadows on the snow. I parked my car a safe distance away, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. The woods around the house were thick and silent, the only sounds the crunch of snow under my boots and the distant call of an owl. Taking a deep breath, I approached the front door, pushing it open with a creak that echoed through the empty halls. Inside, the mansion was a relic of a bygone era. Dust hung thick in the air, and the remnants of furniture lay scattered across the floor, covered in white sheets that resembled ghostly apparitions. I switched on my flashlight, its beam piercing the darkness as I made my way through the grand foyer. Portraits of stern-looking ancestors adorned the walls, their eyes seeming to follow my every move. I decided to start my exploration in the living room, where the legend said Eleanor's cries were most often heard. The room was spacious, with a large fireplace that still held traces of soot and ashes. As I set up my equipment, a chill ran down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Hours passed in uneasy silence, the only sounds my own breathing and the occasional creak of the old house settling. Just as I was about to call it a night, a soft, sorrowful wail echoed through the halls. My heart raced as I froze, the haunting cry unmistakable. It was a woman's voice, filled with anguish and despair, reverberating through the mansion's empty corridors. Gathering my courage, I followed the sound, my flashlight guiding me through the labyrinthine hallways. The cries led me to a grand staircase, its once elegant banister now splintered and worn. As I ascended, the temperature seemed to drop, the air growing colder with each step. At the top of the stairs, I found myself in a long hallway lined with closed doors. The crying grew louder, pulling me towards the end of the corridor. There, in the center of the room, stood a ghostly figure, a woman dressed in a flowing white gown, her face pale and eyes hollow with sorrow. She floated above the ground, her presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. The room seemed to warp around her, the walls fading into an endless expanse of darkness. "Why do you linger here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, fearing that speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace. The apparition turned towards me, her eyes meeting mine with a profound sadness. "I lost my child here," she whispered, her voice echoing through the emptiness. "I cannot find peace until my child returns to me." Tears welled in my eyes as I reached out, desperate to offer comfort. "I'm sorry for your loss. Is there anything I can do to help?" She floated closer, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. "Remember us. Tell our story so that we are not forgotten." Before I could respond, the room began to tremble, the walls shaking as if the house itself was crying out in pain. The ghostly figure started to fade, her sorrowful gaze lingering on me. "Thank you," she whispered, before disappearing entirely, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of sadness and loss. The temperature returned to normal, and the house fell silent once more. I stood there, shaken by the encounter, realizing the depth of Eleanor Hart's eternal sorrow. Determined to honor her request, I left the crying house with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that some stories are meant to be remembered and shared. In the days that followed, I wrote extensively about my experience, delving into the history of the Hart family and the tragic events that led to the haunting. Through interviews with local residents and research in town archives, I uncovered the heartbreaking tale of Eleanor and her child, whose lives were cut short by a sudden illness that swept through the town. As my story gained attention, the crying house became a place of pilgrimage for those seeking to pay their respects and listen to the sorrowful cries that still echoed through its halls. Visitors came with candles and offerings, hoping to bring a sense of peace to Eleanor's restless spirit. The mansion, once a symbol of neglect and abandonment, transformed into a beacon of remembrance and compassion. Every winter, as the first snowflakes begin to fall, I think back to that fateful night in Willow Creek. The image of Eleanor Hart, standing alone in the darkened hallway, serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring bonds between the living and the dead. Her story, a testament to a mother's love and loss, continues to resonate with those who hear it, ensuring that the crying house remains a place where sorrow is acknowledged and remembered. And so, as I continue my journey as a writer, I carry with me the lessons learned from the crying house, lessons of empathy, remembrance, and the unbreakable connection that binds us all. Even in the face of the deepest sorrow, the legend of Eleanor Hart lives on. Her cries a haunting yet beautiful melody that echoes through the winter nights of Willow Creek, forever reminding us to honor the stories that shape our lives and the spirits that linger in the shadows. Story number 2. The Girl in the Cornfield. Winter in Iowa brought a silence that blanketed the vast cornfields, turning them into endless seas of white under the thick frost. The small town of Maplewood nestled among these fields, its close-knit community bound by generations of farming and shared legends. As an investigative journalist with a keen interest in local folklore, I was drawn to the stories that lingered in the shadows of everyday life. One tale, in particular, had piqued my curiosity: the legend of the girl in the cornfield. The story was as old as the town itself, passed down through whispered conversations around dinner tables and shared under the dim glow of porch lights. They spoke of a young girl named Lily, whose life was tragically cut short one fateful autumn evening. Her disappearance had left an indelible mark on the community, and it was said that her restless spirit roamed the cornfields at sunset, her long hair trailing behind her like strands of sorrow. Witnesses claimed that anyone who gazed upon her would find themselves inexplicably lost, unable to navigate back to the main road no matter how familiar the terrain. Skeptical by nature, I dismissed the stories as mere folklore, a way for the townsfolk to explain the unexplainable. However, my skepticism was challenged when I received an anonymous tip suggesting that the truth behind Lily's disappearance was closer than anyone dared to believe. Intrigued and determined to uncover the facts, I decided to spend a weekend in Maplewood, delving into the mystery that had haunted the town for decades. I arrived in Maplewood on a crisp Friday afternoon, the town exuding a quiet charm with its quaint shops and friendly faces. My base of operations was an old farmhouse on the outskirts, surrounded by acres of cornfields that stretched as far as the eye could see. The farmhouse, with its creaky floors and weathered exterior, seemed to embody the spirit of the town, resilient yet haunted by its past. That night, as the sun began its slow descent behind the horizon, I ventured out into the cornfields, armed with my camera, notebook, and a sturdy flashlight. The air was thick with the scent of earth and frost. The only sounds the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. I walked along the narrow path that meandered through the towering stalks, the fading light casting long shadows that danced eerily around me. As twilight deepened, a chill settled over the landscape, and the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky. It was then that I saw her, a figure standing at the far end of the cornfield, her silhouette unmistakable against the dusky backdrop. She wore a flowing white dress that billowed gently in the evening breeze, her long hair cascading down her back like a silken waterfall. Her presence was both mesmerizing and unsettling, an ethereal beauty that seemed to transcend the natural world. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and fascination. The closer I got, the more I felt an inexplicable pull, as if the very ground beneath me was drawing me toward her. Her face was pale and sorrowful, her eyes reflecting a depth of sadness that spoke of a tragedy long past. She turned to face me, her gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She did not respond with words. Instead, she began to move, gliding gracefully through the cornfield as if floating on air. I followed, the stalks swaying around me like the arms of restless spirits. The path seemed to twist and turn, leading me deeper into the maze of corn. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams of light that failed to penetrate the thickening darkness. Minutes felt like hours as I trudged through the endless rows, the sounds of the night growing louder, whispers carried by the wind, the distant call of a nocturnal creature, and the soft rustle of corn leaves brushing against each other. Panic set in as I realized I had lost sight of the main road, the landmarks that should have guided me nowhere to be found. The cornfield seemed to stretch infinitely, each row identical to the last, creating a disorienting labyrinth that played tricks on my mind. Desperation clawed at me as I turned to retrace my steps, only to find that the corn had shifted subtly, the path I had taken now obscured by the shifting stalks. The girl in the cornfield remained just out of reach, her presence a constant reminder of my entrapment. Her long hair brushed against my face, and I could feel the chill of her sorrow seeping into my bones. The sky above was now a blanket of inky blackness, the stars obscured by the dense canopy of corn. I stumbled forward, my breaths coming in sharp gasps as the cold bit into my skin. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, their voices overlapping in a haunting chorus that echoed through the night. "Don't forget us. Help us." The words were fragmented, yet their meaning was clear, a plea for remembrance and release from their eternal wandering. As I pushed through a particularly dense section of the cornfield, I heard a faint melody, a soft, sorrowful lullaby that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the field. The song was hauntingly beautiful, its notes lingering in the air like a ghostly echo. The girl in the cornfield appeared once more, her presence illuminated by the moonlight that managed to pierce through the dense foliage. "Why can't you leave?" I cried out, my voice breaking with emotion. "What happened to you?" She paused, her eyes meeting mine with a sorrow that seemed to stretch across time. "We are lost," she whispered, her voice blending seamlessly with the melody. "Bound by our memories, unable to find peace." Tears welled in my eyes as the weight of her words settled upon me. I reached out, my hand trembling, but she faded before my touch could connect with hers, dissolving into the mist that now enveloped the cornfield. The melody continued, the notes carrying me deeper into the abyss of the night. In that moment, I understood that the girl in the cornfield was not just a tragic figure of the past but a manifestation of the town's collective grief and loss. Her presence was a reminder of the lives that had been forever changed, the stories that had been left untold, and the sorrow that lingered in the silent rows of corn. With renewed determination, I vowed to uncover the truth behind Lily's disappearance and the haunting that had plagued Maplewood for so long. The experience had left an indelible mark on me, a profound connection to the spirits that roamed the cornfields and a deep sense of responsibility to honor their memories. The following days were a blur of interviews and research, piecing together fragments of the past from old newspaper clippings, town records, and the recollections of the elderly residents who still remembered the events of that tragic autumn. I learned that Lily had been a beloved daughter and sister, her laughter once filling the halls of the Hart family farmhouse before the night she vanished without a trace. Theories abounded. Some blamed the harsh winter weather. Others whispered of foul play, but no answers were ever found. As winter gave way to spring, the cornfields began to awaken with new life, the white blanket of snow giving way to vibrant green stalks swaying gently in the breeze. The legend of the girl in the cornfield remained a poignant reminder of the town's enduring pain. But my investigation had brought a sense of closure to the restless spirits that had haunted Maplewood for so long. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I returned to the cornfield one last time. The air was warm, the scent of blossoming flowers filling the night air. I walked through the familiar rows, the memory of that haunting night guiding my steps. As I reached the clearing where I had first encountered Lily, I felt a gentle breeze brush against my face, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter, soft, joyful, and free. I turned to leave, my heart light with the knowledge that the spirits had finally found peace. The girl in the cornfield had been remembered, her story told, and her sorrow acknowledged. As I drove away from Maplewood, the cornfields stretching out behind me, I knew that some legends are not meant to instill fear but to preserve the memories of those who came before us. In the years that followed, the story of the girl in the cornfield became a cherished part of Maplewood's heritage, a testament to the enduring bonds of love and the power of remembrance. And every winter, as the first snowflakes begin to fall, I think back to that night in the cornfield, a haunting yet beautiful reminder of the spirits that linger in the shadows and the stories that must never be forgotten. Story number 3. Silent Woods. Winter in Vermont had a way of muting the world, cloaking the landscape in a serene, white silence that seemed almost sacred. The snow lay thick on the ground, transforming familiar paths into uncharted territories and turning the dense forests into endless expanses of tranquility. It was this quiet allure that drew me to Silent Woods, a place shrouded in local legend and whispered fears. I had always been fascinated by the unknown, the stories that lingered in the shadows of everyday life. As a freelance writer, I thrived on exploring the unexplained, seeking out the eerie and the mysterious to weave into my narratives. When I heard about Silent Woods from an old college friend, I knew I had to experience it for myself. The town of Maple Ridge lay on the outskirts of Silent Woods, a small, tight-knit community where everyone knew each other's business. The locals spoke of the forest with a mixture of reverence and fear, cautioning outsiders to stay away after dark. They said that once you stepped into Silent Woods, the world outside faded away, leaving you in a realm where sounds ceased to exist and unseen eyes watched your every move. Intrigued and undeterred by their warnings, I decided to spend a weekend camping near the edge of the forest. Armed with my camera, notebook, and a healthy dose of skepticism, my goal was simple: document my experience and uncover the truth behind the legends that had captivated my imagination for so long. I arrived in Maple Ridge on a Friday afternoon, the sun dipping low behind the towering pines that bordered Silent Woods. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the faint promise of snow. I checked into a modest cabin provided by a local friend, Sarah, who had warned me about the forest's peculiar reputation. "Be careful," she had said, her eyes darting nervously. "Silent Woods isn't like other forests. Once you're in, it's hard to leave." I shrugged off her concerns, chalking them up to old-timers' tales meant to keep people away. As night fell, I set up my campsite near the forest's edge, the fire crackling warmly against the encroaching chill. The sky was a blanket of stars, and the moon cast a silvery glow over the pristine snow. By midnight, a heavy silence had settled over the woods, the kind that pressed against your eardrums and makes every heartbeat sound like a drumbeat. I sat by the fire, sipping hot tea, and scribbled notes about my surroundings. The tranquility was almost unnerving, but I found a strange comfort in the stillness. Just as I began to drift off, a faint rustling caught my attention. I glanced towards the trees, expecting to see an animal or perhaps the wind stirring the branches. But there was nothing, only the unbroken silence that Silent Woods was infamous for. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, attributing it to my overactive imagination. However, the next morning, I awoke to find my campsite altered. My camera was missing, and my notebook lay on the ground, pages fluttering as if caught in an invisible breeze. Puzzled, I scanned the area, but the forest remained impenetrably silent. Determined to uncover the cause, I ventured deeper into Silent Woods, the snow crunching softly beneath my boots. The trees loomed tall and foreboding, their branches intertwining to form a natural canopy that blocked out the sky. As I walked, I felt a presence, an almost tangible sensation of being watched. My heart pounded, each step echoing louder in the oppressive silence. Hours passed without any sign of movement or sound, the forest holding its breath around me. Just as I began to question my decision, I stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood an old, weathered cabin, its windows dark and boarded up. The air around it felt heavy, laden with an unspoken sorrow. Summoning my courage, I approached the cabin, the silence pressing in on me from all sides. The door creaked open at my touch, revealing a dimly lit interior. Dust particles danced in the beam of my flashlight, and the remnants of a once cozy home lay scattered about. Furniture covered in white sheets, a fireplace cold and empty. As I explored the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The silence was so absolute that even the slightest sound seemed amplified in my ears. I began to hear faint whispers, barely audible, like the distant echo of a sorrowful lullaby. My skin prickled with the sensation of unseen eyes watching me. In the corner of the living room, I found a dusty old photograph of a family, parents, and a young girl with long, flowing hair, standing proudly in front of the cabin. Her eyes seemed to follow me as I moved, filled with a melancholic sadness that tugged at my heart. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, my breath visible in the frigid air. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, forming words that chilled me to the bone. "Why are you here?" the voice asked, its tone filled with anguish. I spun around, heart racing, but there was no one in sight. The cabin remained empty, the shadows dancing eerily on the walls. Desperate for answers, I retraced my steps, intent on leaving the oppressive atmosphere behind. But as I reached the door, it slammed shut with a deafening bang, the sound echoing through the silent woods. Panic surged through me as I pounded on the door, shouting for help. My voice seemed to vanish into the void, swallowed by the unyielding silence. The whispers returned, now surrounding me, voices overlapping in a sorrowful chorus. "Stay with us. Don't leave us." The realization hit me like a cold wave. I was trapped in Silent Woods, bound by the restless spirits of those who had lost their way. The air grew thick with sorrow and desperation, the presence of the unseen forces pressing down on me. I felt invisible hands tugging at my sanity, the forest itself conspiring to keep me captive. In a last-ditch effort, I clutched my notebook, scribbling frantic notes about my experience, hoping that someone, somewhere, would find them and uncover the truth behind the crying house. As I wrote, the whispers intensified, the voices merging into a cacophony of grief and longing. "Remember us, honor our memories." Tears streamed down my face as I realized the depth of their pain, the endless sorrow that kept them tethered to this forsaken place. I made a silent vow to tell their story, to ensure that their voices would not be silenced by the oppressive quiet of Silent Woods. Just as hope began to wane, a faint glimmer of light pierced the darkness, drawing me towards the center of the clearing. Following the light, I found myself standing before the photograph I had discovered earlier. The image shimmered, the young girl's eyes meeting mine with a pleading sorrow. "Help us find peace," she whispered, her voice soft yet powerful. In that moment, the cabin's oppressive grip began to loosen, the whispers fading into a gentle breeze that carried away the lingering sorrow. The door swung open effortlessly, the first rays of dawn breaking through the trees and bathing the forest in a soft, golden light. Breathing a sigh of relief, I stepped out of the cabin, the heavy atmosphere lifting as I made my way back through the silent woods. The forest, once a place of unyielding silence, now seemed to hum with a gentle melody, the voices of the lost finally finding their peace. Back in Maple Ridge, I shared my story with the locals, the legend of the crying house gaining new depth with my first-hand account. The town embraced the tale, honoring the memories of those who had been lost and ensuring that their voices would echo through generations to come. Every winter, as the first snowflakes begin to fall, I think back to that harrowing night in Silent Woods, the image of the crying spirits, their sorrowful pleas, and the haunting beauty of the frozen forest remain etched in my mind, a testament to the enduring power of memory, compassion, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all, even in the most desolate of places. And so, the legend of the crying house lives on, a reminder that some stories are meant to be heard, their echoes lingering in the silent corners of the world, waiting to be remembered and honored by those who dare to listen. Story number 4. The Man with the Oil Lamp. Winter in Tennessee was a deceptive time of year. The crisp air carried a biting chill that seeped into every corner of the small town of Willow Creek. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, the town seemed almost forgotten by time, its streets silent under the heavy blanket of snow. As an aspiring writer, I found solace in the isolation, believing it to be the perfect environment to kindle my creativity. Little did I know, Willow Creek held secrets that would forever change my perception of reality. It was late November when I first heard the stories about the man with the oil lamp. Locals whispered about him in hushed tones, cautioning outsiders to stay away from the old hiking trails that wove through the surrounding woods. According to legend, a solitary figure appeared on these desolate paths at night, carrying nothing but an oil lamp. He never spoke, only stood there, staring intensely. Those unfortunate enough to catch his gaze would feel an inexplicable urge to approach, only to watch him vanish into thin air, leaving behind an eerie silence and the unsettling sound of footsteps echoing behind them. Skeptical by nature, I dismissed these tales as mere folklore, a way for the townsfolk to explain the unexplained disappearances that occasionally plagued Willow Creek. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to spend a weekend hiking the infamous trails, armed with my camera, notebook, and a healthy dose of skepticism. Saturday morning arrived with a sky painted in shades of gray, the sun struggling to pierce through the thick clouds. I set out early, the snow crunching beneath my boots as I ventured into the heart of the woods. The trails were well marked, winding through towering pines and across frozen streams. As the day progressed, the landscape transformed under the heavy snowfall, the world becoming a monochromatic canvas of white and shadow. By late afternoon, I had covered several miles, the isolation of the forest both exhilarating and unnerving. As dusk began to settle, casting long, eerie shadows across the snow, I found a secluded spot to set up camp. The sky darkened rapidly, the temperature dropping sharply as night approached. I built a small fire, the warmth a welcome respite against the encroaching cold. As I sat by the fire, jotting down notes about the unique flora and fauna I had encountered, a sense of unease began to creep over me. The forest, usually teeming with life, was unnaturally silent. Even the occasional rustle of a squirrel or the distant call of an owl seemed absent. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to the isolation and the chilly night air. Just as I was about to retire for the evening, the faint glimmer caught my eye. Through the dense trees, a soft, golden light flickered, bobbing gently through the snow. My heart skipped a beat as I realized what I was seeing. The oil lamp. The man with the oil lamp had appeared. I stared in disbelief. The stories playing out before my eyes. The figure stood at the edge of the clearing, his back to me, the lamp casting a warm glow that illuminated his solitary stance. He was dressed in a long, dark coat that fluttered slightly in the cold breeze, his hat casting a shadow over his face. There was an air of melancholy about him, a profound sadness that seemed to emanate from his very presence. Despite my fear, curiosity overpowered caution. I grabbed my camera, hoping to capture an image of the elusive figure. As I slowly approached, the air grew colder, each breath a visible puff in the frigid night. The forest around me seemed to grow darker, the shadows deepening as I drew closer to the man. He remained motionless, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I felt an inexplicable urge to speak, to ask him who he was and why he wandered these forsaken trails. But no words came to mind, my voice failing me under the weight of his silent stare. As I took another step forward, the man turned abruptly, his eyes meeting mine through the brim of his hat. Time seemed to stand still as I locked eyes with him, a connection that transcended words. In that moment, I felt a surge of fear and desperation, as if an invisible force was urging me to follow him deeper into the woods. Before I could react, the man began to walk, his steps measured and deliberate. The oil lamp swung gently in his hand, casting flickering shadows that danced across the snow. Instinctively, I followed, my heart pounding in my chest as I trudged through the thickening snow, the forest around me closing in like the walls of a coffin. We moved silently, the only sounds the crunch of my boots on the snow and the occasional rustle of branches swaying in the wind. The trail seemed to twist and turn unnaturally, leading us deeper into the heart of the forest. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the impossible. This man appeared out of nowhere, leading me on a path that seemed to have no end. After what felt like hours, we arrived at a small, abandoned cabin nestled among the trees. The man paused, turning to face me, his eyes, still glowing with an otherworldly light, held a sorrow that mirrored my own fear. He extended his hand, the oil lamp casting a warm, inviting glow that contrasted with the cold darkness surrounding us. "Why are you here?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. He remained silent, his expression unreadable. Slowly, he turned and began to walk away, disappearing into the shadows as the first light of dawn began to break through the trees. Confused and disoriented, I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just transpired. The cabin behind me seemed to pulsate with a silent energy, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Gathering my courage, I decided to follow him once more, hoping to uncover the truth behind his haunting presence. As I stepped back onto the trail, the forest seemed to come alive, the silence now broken by the soft echo of footsteps mirroring my own. Panic set in as I realized that I was no longer alone. Whatever force had brought the man with the oil lamp was now toying with me, keeping me trapped within the confines of silent woods. Desperate to escape, I turned back towards the cabin, but the trail had vanished, swallowed by the encroaching snow. The footsteps grew louder, more insistent, as if an unseen presence was closing in on me from all sides. My heart raced, my breaths coming in short, sharp gasps as I navigated the labyrinthine paths of the forest. The oppressive silence now filled with the sound of my own fear. As night fully descended, the temperature plummeted, the cold becoming unbearable. I stumbled through the snow, my vision blurred by tears and the biting wind. Just when I thought I couldn't go any further, a faint light appeared in the distance, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. I sprinted towards it, the footsteps now a cacophony of echoes that seemed to chase me relentlessly. Bursting into a clearing, I found myself face to face with the cabin once more, the door swinging open as if inviting me inside. Without hesitation, I dove through the doorway, collapsing onto the cold, wooden floor. The interior was exactly as I had left it, an abandoned relic of the past, untouched by time. But something had changed. The room was filled with a faint, ethereal glow, and the air was thick with the scent of old wood and lingering sorrow. As I struggled to my feet, the door slammed shut behind me, the sound reverberating through the cabin like a death knell. The room grew colder, the shadows deepening as the presence of the man with the oil lamp returned. His form now materializing before me. His eyes held the same sorrowful intensity, and I felt an overwhelming sense of despair wash over me. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Help me find peace." Tears streamed down my face as I realized that his presence was a manifestation of his unresolved pain, a spirit trapped between worlds. Longing for release, I approached him cautiously, reaching out a trembling hand. "What do you need me to do?" He extended his oil lamp, the warm light flickering in his hand. "Light the way. Help me guide the lost souls back to the path of peace." Understanding the depth of his request, I took the lamp from his hand, feeling its warmth seep into my skin. As I held it aloft, the room brightened, the shadows retreating as the light illuminated the forgotten corners of the cabin. The oppressive atmosphere began to lift, replaced by a sense of calm and release. Together, we walked through the cabin, the oil lamp leading the way as the spirits of the lost began to materialize, their forms shimmering in the newfound light. Each soul had a story, a memory that tethered them to this world, and the lamp served as a beacon to guide them towards peace. As the last spirit found its way, the man with the oil lamp smiled, a gesture filled with gratitude and relief. "Thank you," he whispered, his form beginning to fade as the first rays of dawn broke through the cabin windows. With a final, lingering glance, he vanished, leaving me alone in the now peaceful cabin. The oil lamp remained in my hand, its light still warm and steady, a symbol of the connection between the living and the dead, and the power of compassion to bridge the gap between worlds. Exhausted but fulfilled, I stepped out of the cabin into the bright morning light. The forest around me was no longer oppressive but serene, the snow glistening under the clear sky as if celebrating the newfound peace. The trails that had once seemed endless now led me back to Willow Creek, the town welcoming me with open arms and knowing smiles. In the days that followed, I shared my experience with the locals, ensuring that the story of the man with the oil lamp was remembered not as a tale of fear, but as a testament to the enduring power of empathy and the importance of honoring those who had been lost. The legend of Silent Woods took on a new meaning, a story of redemption and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all. Even beyond death, every winter, as the first snowflakes begin to fall, I think back to that fateful weekend in Willow Creek. The image of the man with the oil lamp, standing silently in the snow, serves as a haunting yet beautiful reminder of the spirits that linger in the shadows and the stories that must never be forgotten. And as I continue my journey as a writer, exploring the mysteries that lie hidden in the world, I carry with me the lessons learned from the silent trails of Silent Woods, a beacon guiding me through the darkness, illuminating the path towards understanding and compassion. Story number 5. The Haunted Bridge. Winter in Indiana transformed the landscape into a quiet, snow-covered expanse, where even the slightest sound seemed amplified against the blanket of white. The small town of Maplewood sat nestled along the banks of Willow Creek, its heart beating near the old stone bridge, a rickety structure that spanned the gently flowing river. The bridge had stood for over a century, its wooden planks weathered by countless storms and seasons. But it was more than just a passageway. It was the epicenter of Maplewood's darkest legends. I had always been intrigued by local folklore, the stories that townsfolk whispered about in hushed tones by the fire. The legend of Stonebridge was one such tale, a story of tragedy and the supernatural that had been passed down through generations. According to the lore, the bridge was cursed, a place where restless spirits lingered, drawn to the living by unresolved anguish and sorrow. Many claim to have witnessed apparitions of people jumping into the river below or heard eerie laughter echoing from the depths of the water on cold, moonless nights. As a freelance journalist with a penchant for the paranormal, I saw the legend of Stonebridge as the perfect subject for my next story. Armed with my camera, a sturdy flashlight, and an insatiable curiosity, I decided to spend a night near the bridge, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural occurrences that had haunted Maplewood for so long. Friday evening arrived, and I made my way to a secluded spot a few blocks from the bridge, where the view was unobstructed and the sound of the river provided a natural white noise. The sun had set hours earlier, and the town had settled into a tranquil silence, broken only by the occasional distant bark of a dog or the rustle of leaves in the chilly breeze. I set up my equipment, securing my camera on a tripod and placing motion sensors around the area, all while keeping an eye on my notebook for any observations. As midnight approached, the temperature dropped sharply, the air growing thin and crisp. The moon was a mere sliver in the sky, casting a faint glow that barely illuminated the path ahead. I sat in my chair, waiting patiently, the anticipation building with each passing minute. The wind picked up, howling through the trees and sending a chill down my spine. I wrapped my coat tighter around me, the cold biting through my layers with merciless precision. At precisely 12 o'clock, the first sign of something unusual occurred. A faint, ghostly light appeared on the far end of Stonebridge, its source obscured by the shadows of the surrounding trees. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it towards the light, trying to discern its origin. The beam of light remained steady, unwavering despite the darkness that enveloped the bridge. My heart began to race as I watched, transfixed by the mysterious illumination. Minutes passed, and the light began to move slowly along the length of the bridge. It hovered just above the wooden planks, casting long, distorted shadows that danced eerily in the periphery of my vision. I raised my camera, capturing the phenomenon, my hands trembling slightly from a mix of fear and excitement. Suddenly, the light paused, and the temperature around me seemed to drop even further, the cold now palpable and almost suffocating. Then, out of the darkness, came a faint sound, a soft, sorrowful crying that seemed to emanate from the very soul of the bridge. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, filled with a deep, unresolved pain that resonated within me. I turned my flashlight towards the source of the noise, revealing the figure of a woman standing at the edge of the bridge, her long hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes hollow with despair. She wore a flowing white dress, the fabric shimmering under the pale light, and her presence was both ethereal and tragic. "Why are you here?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the mournful cries. The woman turned to face me, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. She did not speak, but her gaze held a silent plea, a desperate longing for something I couldn't quite comprehend. As I stepped closer, the ground beneath me seemed to grow colder, the air thick with an unspoken sorrow that pressed down on me like a heavy weight. Before I could react, the woman raised her hand, pointing towards the center of the bridge. My flashlight flickered, the beam wavering as if struggling against an invisible force. I followed her gesture, my eyes fixed on the ground below. To my horror, I saw footprints, fresh, deliberate impressions leading towards the river, disappearing into the icy water as if swallowed by the depths. A sudden gust of wind howled through the trees, and the woman began to fade, her form becoming more translucent with each passing second. The crying intensified, now mixed with a haunting laughter that echoed through the night. I felt a presence behind me, a chilling sensation that made me turn around. There, emerging from the shadows, was a figure clad in dark clothing, his face obscured by the brim of a hat. He stood motionless, staring at me with eyes that glowed a fiery red, filled with a malevolent energy that sent a surge of fear through me. "Don't follow her," he warned, his voice a low growl that resonated deep within my bones. I stumbled backward, my mind racing to process the apparition before me. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. He did not respond with words. Instead, he raised his hand, and the air around us grew colder, the shadows deepening as if drawn towards his presence. I felt an invisible force pulling me towards the bridge, my feet moving of their own accord despite my desperate attempts to resist. The cold was now unbearable, each breath a struggle against the icy grip that threatened to sap my strength. As I was dragged towards the center of the bridge, the woman's figure reappeared, her eyes now filled with a sorrowful resolve. The malevolent figure stood beside her, a stark contrast to her ethereal beauty. Together, they formed a haunting tableau against the backdrop of the frozen river, their presence a chilling reminder of the bridge's dark past. The crying and laughter reached a crescendo, the sounds blending into a cacophony of anguish and despair that filled the night air. I felt my consciousness slipping, the overwhelming emotions threatening to engulf me. Just as I was about to succumb to the darkness, a sudden flash of light pierced through the shadows, breaking the hold of the apparitions. The figures vanished in an instant, the temperature returning to normal as the first rays of dawn began to break over the horizon. Breathing heavily, I found myself standing alone on the bridge, the snow glistening in the morning light. The footprints leading to the river were gone, as if erased by the hand of fate. Shaken to my core, I packed up my equipment, my mind racing with the night's terrifying events. I knew I had captured something extraordinary, something that defied explanation, but I also understood the weight of the responsibility that now rested on my shoulders. Returning to Maplewood, I shared my story with the locals, showing them the footage I had captured. The reaction was a mix of awe and fear, the townsfolk nodding in solemn agreement as I recounted the encounter. They spoke of Eleanor Hart, a mother who had lost her child in a tragic accident on Stonebridge decades ago. Her spirit, it seemed, was still bound to the bridge, unable to find peace until her story was told and her sorrow acknowledged. Determined to honor Eleanor's memory, I delved deeper into the history of Stonebridge, uncovering the layers of tragedy that had woven themselves into the very fabric of the town. The more I learned, the more I realized that the bridge was not just a site of physical accidents, but a spiritual nexus where unresolved grief and lingering spirits coexisted in a delicate balance. In the weeks that followed, I organized a memorial at Stonebridge, inviting the townsfolk to come together and share their memories of Eleanor and the lives lost to the bridge's dark legacy. Candles were lit, and prayers were offered, the flickering flames casting a warm glow against the cold winter backdrop. As the ceremony concluded, a profound sense of peace settled over the bridge, the oppressive sorrow lifting as if the spirits had finally found the closure they had long sought. The next time I visited Stonebridge, the legends had changed. The bridge stood silent, its dark history acknowledged and respected. The haunting presence of Eleanor and the malevolent figure no longer a source of fear but a testament to the enduring power of remembrance and compassion. The bridge had been cleansed, the spirits free to move on, leaving behind only the whispers of the past and the hope of a brighter future. Every winter, as the first snowflakes begin to fall and the wind whispers through the trees, I think back to that fateful night on Stonebridge, the image of Eleanor Hart, standing in sorrow and seeking peace, remains a poignant reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Her story, once shrouded in fear and mystery, now serves as a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of empathy and the importance of honoring the memories that shape our lives. And so, the legend of the haunted bridge lives on, not as a tale of terror but as a story of love, loss, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all, even beyond the veil of death. As I continue my journey as a writer, exploring the mysteries that lie hidden in the shadows, I carry with me the lessons learned from Stonebridge, a beacon guiding me through the darkness, illuminating the path towards understanding and compassion for the restless spirits that once haunted the night. Story number 6. The Cursed Farm. Winter in Kansas was unforgiving. The expansive plains, usually a patchwork quilt of green and gold, transformed into a vast, monochromatic desert of white and gray. The cold seeped into every crack and crevice, turning the landscape into a frozen tableau of silence and solitude. It was during one such harsh winter that I found myself drawn to the abandoned Hartley farm, a place whispered about in Maplewood's local legends and avoided by most. I had always been fascinated by the unknown, the stories that lingered in the shadows of everyday life. As a freelance journalist with a penchant for the paranormal, I sought out the eerie and unexplained, hoping to capture tales that would send shivers down my readers' spines. The Hartley farm was the perfect subject, a relic of a tragic past, shrouded in mystery and sorrow. Maplewood, a small town nestled in the heart of Kansas, held its secrets tightly. The Hartley family had been pillars of the community in the early 1900s, known for their prosperous farm and generous spirit. But everything changed on a bitter December night in 1908. A brutal massacre left the farm eerily silent. The family wiped out without a trace. Theories abounded: ruthless bandits, vengeful spirits, or even a curse born from some dark secret. Whatever the cause, the farm was abandoned, left to decay under the weight of its haunted legacy. I arrived in Maplewood on a crisp Friday morning, the town blanketed in fresh snow. The locals eyed me with a mixture of curiosity and caution, their eyes lingering on me as I made my way to the outskirts where the farm stood like a ghostly sentinel. The Hartley farm was a sprawling estate, its once majestic farmhouse now a crumbling structure overtaken by nature. The windows were shattered, doors hung ajar, and the yard was choked with overgrown weeds and the skeletal remains of what once were vibrant gardens. Setting up my equipment near the perimeter, I took a moment to absorb the scene. The silence was palpable, broken only by the distant howl of the wind and the occasional creak of the old wood swaying in the breeze. The farmhouse loomed ahead, its presence both inviting and foreboding. I checked my camera and recorder, ensuring everything was in working order before venturing inside. The door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, the sound echoing through the hollow halls. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. I moved cautiously through the rooms, each one a snapshot of a bygone era. Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls. Furniture lay draped in white sheets, and personal belongings were scattered haphazardly, as if the family had left in a hurry. In the living room, I found remnants of a once cozy fire, now cold and ash-covered. I set up my recorder, placing it on the mantel, and began to explore further. The upstairs hallway beckoned, its narrow corridor stretching into darkness. As I ascended the stairs, the temperature seemed to drop, my breath visible in the dim light. The silence was oppressive, the only sound my footsteps crunching on the broken floorboards. Reaching the master bedroom, I felt a chill run down my spine. The room was larger than the others, with a grand bed at its center, its sheets tattered and covers ripped apart. A large wardrobe stood against one wall, its doors wide open, revealing empty hangers swaying slightly as if moved by an unseen force. I scanned the room, my flashlight catching a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow flitting across the wall. Gone before I could react. Heart pounding, I turned to face the spot where the shadow had been. But there was nothing. The room was empty, save for the remnants of the past. I sat down on the edge of the bed, pulling out my notebook to jot down my observations. As I wrote, the temperature dropped further, the air growing heavy with an unspoken sorrow. Suddenly, a soft, mournful cry echoed through the room, sending a jolt of fear through me. I jumped up, shining my flashlight towards the sound. But the room remained silent once more. My heart raced as I realized that the farmhouse was not as abandoned as I had thought. The spirits of the Hartley family lingered, their tragic end leaving a residue of anguish that permeated the very walls of the house. Determined to uncover more, I decided to conduct a séance, hoping to communicate with the restless souls trapped within. I arranged a circle of candles in the living room, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. I sat in the center, closing my eyes and reaching out with my mind. willing the spirits to make contact. For what felt like hours, there was only silence, the weight of the winter night pressing down on me. Just as I was about to give up, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the candles, plunging the room into darkness. The temperature plummeted, and the air was filled with the sound of whispering voices, their words indistinct but laden with sorrow. A figure materialized before me, a woman in a flowing white dress, her long hair cascading down her shoulders. Her eyes were hollow, filled with a deep, unending sadness. "Why do you disturb our peace?" she whispered, her voice echoing with centuries of pain. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. My voice caught in the suffocating silence. The woman reached out a ghostly hand, her touch sending a surge of cold through my body. "We cannot move on," she cried, her eyes pleading for understanding. "Our loss is eternal, our suffering unending." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized the depth of their torment. "I am sorry," I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. "I will honor your memory." The woman's form began to fade, her sorrowful expression softening as she drifted away. The room returned to silence, the candles flickering back to life as if nothing had happened. I sat there, shaken to my core, understanding that the Hartley family's suffering was a legacy of tragedy that needed to be remembered and honored. In the days that followed, I delved deeper into the history of the Hartley farm, uncovering stories of love, loss, and the events that led to the family's untimely demise. The town archives held newspapers detailing the tragic night of the massacre, painting a picture of a close-knit family torn apart by greed and betrayal. The more I learned, the more I felt a connection to the spirits that lingered within the farmhouse, their stories etched into the very fabric of the land. I decided to share their story, writing an article that not only recounted the haunting experiences, but also paid tribute to the Hartley family's legacy. The piece resonated with readers, bringing attention to the importance of remembering those who have been lost and honoring their memories to help them find peace. The Hartley farm remains a site of both fear and reverence, a place where the past and present intertwine in a delicate dance of sorrow and remembrance. Each winter, as the snow blankets the landscape once more, the echoes of the Hartley family's suffering resonate through the silent halls of the farmhouse, a haunting reminder of the enduring power of love and loss. Every time I think back to that winter night on the Hartley farm, I am reminded of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead, and the responsibility we bear to honor the memories that shape our lives. The crying house stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all, even beyond death. And so, as I continue my journey as a writer, exploring the mysteries that lie hidden in the shadows, I carry with me the lessons learned from the Hartley farm, a beacon guiding me through the darkness, illuminating the path towards understanding and compassion for the restless souls that linger in the silence of forgotten places. Story number 7. The Woman by the Roadside. Winter in Texas had a way of cloaking the landscape in an eerie stillness. The small town of Willow Creek nestled between rolling hills and endless stretches of open land, its quiet streets lined with modest homes and old oak trees that stood sentinel against the biting cold. As an investigative journalist with a fascination for the unexplained, I had heard countless stories about Willow Creek, but none intrigued me as much as the legend of the woman by the roadside. It was a crisp December evening when I arrived in Willow Creek, my car crunching over the fresh snow that blanketed the town. The sky was a deep indigo, stars twinkling faintly through the haze of winter. I checked into the only motel in town, a weary establishment that seemed as much a relic as the stories it held. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, handed me the key with a knowing smile. "You're here about the woman by the roadside, aren't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, surprised by her directness. "Yes, I've heard the stories and wanted to investigate for an article." She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Be careful what you wish for. Some things are better left undisturbed." With that cryptic warning, she turned away, leaving me to ponder her words as I unpacked my gear in the cramped motel room. Determined and undeterred, I decided to start my investigation the following night, hoping to witness the phenomenon firsthand. The next evening, as twilight descended over Willow Creek, I set out to the outskirts of town where the legend was said to manifest. The main road wound its way through vast fields of corn and open plains, the horizon stretching endlessly under the fading light. My car's headlights pierced the gathering darkness as I drove deeper into the rural landscape. The only sounds the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the chilly breeze. Hours passed without incident, the road eerily quiet except for the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. As midnight approached, the temperature dropped sharply, frost forming intricate patterns on the windshield. I decided to take a break, pulling over at a secluded spot where the road curved gently around a bend, offering a clear view of the surrounding wilderness. Parking my car, I stepped out into the cold, the night air biting at my cheeks. Armed with a flashlight and my camera, I began to survey the area, the only light coming from the full moon that hung low in the sky. The fields around me were vast and empty, the snow reflecting the moonlight in a ghostly glow. Everything seemed peaceful, almost too peaceful. Just as I was about to call it a night, a figure emerged from the darkness at the far end of the road. She stood alone, her silhouette outlined against the moonlit landscape. She was dressed in a flowing black dress that billowed gently in the wind, her long hair cascading down her back like a dark waterfall. Her presence was both mesmerizing and unsettling, an ethereal beauty that seemed to transcend the natural world. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her move. She walked slowly towards me, her movements graceful and deliberate. As she drew closer, I noticed her face, pale and sorrowful, her eyes reflecting a depth of sadness that seemed to pull at my very soul. She stood at the edge of the road, staring silently ahead, her gaze fixed on something beyond my sight. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. She did not respond, only continued to stand there, her presence commanding and inexplicably melancholic. I felt a strange compulsion to approach her, a mix of fear and curiosity driving me forward. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car, the cold air prickling my skin as I moved closer. "Are you okay?" I asked softly, trying to mask the apprehension in my voice. She remained silent, her eyes never leaving mine. As I took another step forward, something shifted. The air grew colder, and a heavy sense of dread settled over me. I realized with a start that there was no road behind me, no sign of the town, no lights, nothing but the endless expanse of snow-covered fields stretching into the darkness. Panic surged through me as I turned to look back, but the road had vanished, swallowed by the encroaching night. The woman was still there, unwavering, her presence a haunting reminder of my isolation. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. The road I had just driven down was nowhere to be seen, replaced by an unending wilderness that seemed to trap me in its icy embrace. I fumbled with my flashlight, trying to cast a beam of light towards her, but the cold seemed to sap its strength, leaving me in near-total darkness. The woman's eyes held a sorrowful intensity, and I felt as though she was trying to communicate something, a message lost to time and space. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant howl of the wind through the barren trees. "Please," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Please help me." She took a step towards me, her movements almost otherworldly, gliding across the snow with an effortless grace. As she approached, I noticed something glimmering in her hand, a small oil lamp, its light flickering softly against the darkness. The lamp seemed to pulse with a life of its own, casting dancing shadows that twisted and writhed in the moonlight. "Why are you here?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. Still, she did not respond. Instead, she lifted the lamp higher, the light now illuminating a path leading deeper into the wilderness. My instincts screamed at me to run, to escape the unnerving presence of this spectral woman. But something held me back. The lamp's light seemed to beckon me, urging me to follow. With a mixture of fear and determination, I stepped forward, leaving the safety of my car behind. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I followed the illuminated path, the woman leading me through the desolate landscape. The night seemed to close in around me, the darkness pressing against the edges of my vision. Yet the lamp's light remained steadfast, guiding me forward. As we walked, the wind picked up, swirling snowflakes around us in a frenzied dance. The woman remained silent, her eyes fixed ahead as if she knew exactly where we were going. I couldn't help but feel a sense of impending doom, the weight of the night's events pressing down on me like a physical force. After what felt like an eternity, we reached a clearing, the lamp's light revealing an old, dilapidated bridge spanning a frozen river. The bridge was an architectural marvel, its once proud structure now marred by years of neglect and the harsh elements. The woman stopped at the edge of the bridge, her presence both a beacon and a warning. "This is it," I said, my voice echoing in the stillness. "What do I need to do?" She turned to face me, her eyes filled with an otherworldly sorrow. Without a word, she handed me the oil lamp, her fingers cold and numb to the touch. The lamp felt heavy in my hand, its light flickering with a desperate urgency. I glanced down at the river below, the ice thick and unyielding. Yet beneath its surface, I could see shadows moving, a slow, haunting dance of spectral figures that seemed to be trapped within the frozen embrace. The realization hit me hard. The river was a prison for lost souls, bound to the icy depths by some dark, unresolved tragedy. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The woman pointed towards the center of the bridge, where the lamp's light seemed to concentrate, creating a small, glowing circle. Within the circle, the air shimmered with an ethereal energy, the boundaries between the living and the dead growing thin. I knew then what I had to do. The lamp was more than just a source of light, it was a key, a tool to bridge the gap between our worlds and release the tormented spirits from their eternal bondage. With trembling hands, I stepped into the circle, the lamp's light enveloping me in a warm, comforting glow that contrasted sharply with the biting cold of the night. "Take me there," I whispered, feeling the weight of countless lost souls pressing against my consciousness. The world around me began to shift, the bridge dissolving into a swirl of light and shadow as I was transported into the heart of the spectral realm. The river below me was no longer frozen, but a turbulent sea of darkness, the spirits crying out in anguish and despair. The woman by the roadside stood beside me, her presence a comforting anchor amidst the chaos. Together, we navigated the tumultuous waters, the lamp's light cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope. The spirits reached out to us, their eyes filled with desperation, begging for release from their eternal torment. I knew that to free them, I had to confront the source of their suffering, to uncover the truth behind their tragic fate. As we journeyed deeper, we came upon a shadowy figure, a man cloaked in darkness, his face obscured by the brim of a hat. He stood at the edge of a crumbling dock, a sense of malevolence emanating from him like a dark cloud. The spirits recoiled in fear, their cries growing louder as they sensed his presence. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. The man did not respond with words. Instead, he raised a hand, the darkness swirling around him as if responding to an unspoken command. "You should not have come here," he intoned, his voice a hollow echo that reverberated through the spectral realm, determined to protect the lost souls and bring them the peace they deserved. I stepped forward, the lamp's light blazing brightly as I faced the dark figure. "We are here to help," I declared, my voice unwavering. "Let them go." The man sneered, his eyes burning with a malicious fire. "You cannot change what has been done," he spat, his presence threatening and oppressive. But I refused to back down. "Every soul deserves peace," I insisted, the lamp's light intensifying as if fueled by my resolve. Release them. A fierce battle ensued, the spectral forces clashing in a dance of light and darkness. The man wielded shadows like weapons, attempting to extinguish the lamp's glow. But the light remained steadfast, a symbol of hope and redemption. The spirits watched in awe and fear as the struggle unfolded, their cries blending into a symphony of chaos and despair, summoning every ounce of strength. I focused on the lamp, channeling my will into its light. You cannot imprison them any longer, I shouted, the lamp's beam cutting through the darkness like a ray of dawn. The man let out a blood-curdling scream, his form beginning to dissolve as the lamp's light overwhelmed his darkness. With a final, desperate roar, he vanished, the oppressive presence lifting from the spectral realm. The river below calmed, the dark waters reflecting the radiant light that now filled the space. Thank you, the woman by the roadside whispered, her voice filled with gratitude and relief. They are free now. As the lost souls began to fade, their forms shimmering with newfound peace, I felt a sense of accomplishment and sorrow intertwined within me. The spirits had been liberated, their suffering finally at an end. But the cost had been immense, a journey into the depths of tragedy and the weight of countless lives lost to fate. The woman by the roadside turned to me, her presence fading as the spectral realm began to dissolve around us. Remember their stories, she urged, her voice a fading echo. Honor their memories. With those final words, I was transported back to the icy bridge, the lamp still glowing brightly in my hand. The cold had lifted, replaced by the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. The bridge stood silent, the river calm and still beneath the thawing ice, as if the night's events had never transpired. Shaken but resolute, I made my way back to my car, the legend of the woman by the roadside now a part of my own story. The road ahead seemed less daunting, the mysteries of Willow Creek unraveled yet enriched by the truths I had uncovered. As I drove away from the old stone bridge, the sun rising over the snow-covered landscape, I knew that some legends are not just tales to be told but memories to be honored, ensuring that the spirits who linger still find their peace. In the days that followed, I penned my article, detailing the harrowing encounter and the journey to free the lost souls from their eternal torment. The story resonated with readers, drawing attention to the importance of remembering the past and the enduring power of compassion. The woman by the roadside became more than a local legend. She was a symbol of hope and redemption, a reminder that even in the darkest of nights, light can prevail. Every winter, as the first snowflakes begin to fall and the roads of Willow Creek grow silent, I think back to that night on Stonebridge, the image of the woman by the roadside, standing silently under the moonlit sky, serves as a haunting yet beautiful reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Her story, intertwined with the tragic history of the Hartley family, continues to echo through the frozen landscape, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all, even beyond death. And so, as I continue my journey as a writer, exploring the mysteries that lie hidden in the shadows, I carry with me the lessons learned from the haunted bridge, a beacon guiding me through the darkness, illuminating the path towards understanding and compassion for the restless souls that linger in the silent corners of forgotten places.